God is faithful. This phrase was the first phrase I learned in English. I have been always passionate about learning to speak English since I was a very little young girl. Maybe I was 11 when I decided in my heart that English was going to be my second language, and I would learn at that time, with all my respect to the American English, but I wanted the British English. I don't know why, I didn't know the difference then. But I remember so well coming, when you turn 11, you go to a different grade in school, and then here in Brazil in those days, it's the only time you start learning another language. And here in Brazil, we learn English as a kind of second language. Very basic, really, because we did not have many English teachers in those days. And I come from a very small town. And in this program today, which is a Heart2Heart, if you have been already watching the previous ones, we have already been sharing a little bit of our hearts, and I have already recorded with my husband, I have recorded with my son, Titus, the eldest. And today I just thought it would be nice just to share a little bit with you about my background. My name is Silvie Stevens, Silvia Soares Stevens. In England, most people call me Silvie. Here in Brazil, Silvinha, Silvia, and sometimes some people say, why do you have so many ways for people to call you? I said, listen, it's not, I mean, you have your name that's in your birth certificate, but people just decide to call you sometimes a nickname, and that's how has been my life. And I'm very happy to answer to any of the Silvia, Silvie, Silvie, because it's not important, the name itself. It's you are the person who makes your name. Sometimes I have people say, I don't like my name, I wish I had a different name. Some people really create another name because they don't like the original name. I understand that some names can be really weird, because especially in Brazil, our parents are so creative. They really make up so many names. They join like the great aunt's name with the great grandfather's name and trying to mix it up and create a new name and call their child. And if they have 7 children, they kind of just change one letter to Matt. It's quite amusing when you ask people's name. Even in my house, we are 4 girls. I am Sylvia, then I have Cynthia with S, so it's all with S, and then I have Silcia, which is just one letter from my name, Sylvia, and then Silcia. And all our life we have been mixed up. I remember once Silcia, she was studying in São Paulo, and on her graduation certificate, and they did a monument there with their names engraved there with metal, and anyone that did the name never heard of Silcia. So then they kind of thought, it's written wrong and put Silvie. So I had been graduated many times through my sister, because the only thing that changed our name as a single was only a V for C. I'm Silvie, and then she's Silci. And then, so the surnames were the same, Soares da Silva. And now she's doing doctorate, so I'm quite keen to know in which graduation I'm going to be promoted now through her name. It's just a joke, but it has been true. But I love my sister. We are like, we call her, she and I mean, I love all my sisters. We are very close together. I want to give you a little bit of our background as well. We are more than sisters. We are real friends. We have, like, sometimes we say, like, our souls are like one, because sometimes when one think one thing, the other one has already thought of that, and we call each other and we start to talk at the same time the same thing. It's like, oh, wait a minute. In Portuguese we say like twin souls. Twin souls is like our souls kind of are linked together. So today is a real talk, a heart-to-heart talk, in which I would like just to share a little bit with you about my background. I lived in England for 20 years or more, I think, and I am married to a British, and I have 4 children who are, some of them were born there, some here in Brazil, but they are both dual nationality, they were both bilingual. But for me to arrive there, I have a little journey, and actually my decoration here today, you can see this, you may be like saying, what is this? What on earth is this? This is called an ox cart. You know, before the horse cart, here in Brazil, we had the ox cart, which is an even more kind of ancient way to travel. And this is how my grandfather were transported. He worked from the age of 7, I think, or even younger, with the ox, and he was an expert on this. He could be like, this was his Ferrari. And that is how he was transported from Minas Gerais, which is the state near São Paulo. If you have the map of Brazil there, I would encourage you to see. Brazil is a fascinating country. I am from Brazil, if you don't know what I'm talking about, who am I? I am from Brazil, and Brazil is an amazing country in all aspects of it. There is lots of going on in Brazil right now because of bad administration. I don't want to come there. I just want to talk about the good side, which it's a beautiful natural country. We have natural resorts, and the geographic side of it, and the tourism side of it is beautiful. Beautiful beaches and a beautiful people. You know, Brazilian people. It's not because I'm Brazilian, but we really love the foreigner. It's one thing that made me to love even more another country, because we here in Goiás, our state of Goiás is in the middle of Brazil. So then we have the coast there where you have São Paulo, Rio de Janeiro, and then you have Minas, where my grandfather was born, my grandparents, because all of our people from here comes from Minas. Here was not developed yet. So then on the last 100 years, then everybody started to immigrate by land here and transformed our state in a cattle land. So we have a lot of agriculture here and lots of cows, and so that's why, like, I was born on the farm, and my parents still live there, and they have a small farm, but we grew up, you know, with the cows, with milking cows every morning, drinking straight from the cow, and having a real basic life. When I was born, there was not even electricity in the farm, in that region at all. My dad was the kind of the first one to do a commission with going around all the farmers around and agreeing, you know, to bring the electricity to the region. So he's a pioneer on that, which was a very good innovation, and we are most thankful for that. My grandfather, coming back to him, my grandfather's story, actually I have here a book that was written by a cousin of mine, Dra. Eliane Bontempo. She is my oldest cousin. She and I both had a dream to write about our grandparents' stories, because they are an amazing couple, and they were married together for 70 years. They were 70 years together, and here they are. And in this book, you can see there is lots of story. I would not be able to share everything with you today, but in here we tell that my grandfather was there in Minas, and then the family decided to come to Goiás to buy land here and develop the land here, and they left the whole family, more than 30 people, more than 40 people, I think, and they came on foot, and the children and the women that were pregnant at the time would come inside here, and the oxen, they would come with the pace of the animals, and they stopped. I don't have exactly how many days, but it was over a month of journey. stopping here, there. In those days, there was no roads, so there was no kind of a direction to ask. It was like you stop here, somebody would give some direction, and you would just cross field for miles and miles until you would see another sign of life, stop by, and then keep going. So many times you would go in random ways. So it's a very interesting story. But my grandfather, he is such an extraordinary man. He's still alive. He's 95 years old, and he's still, if we allowed him, he goes up on his horse and go around. He loves to walk in bare feet because that's how he lived until most of his life, until he could, be civilized. So he did not have access to shoes in those days, so his feet is very thick, but he loves still today. As soon as he goes after church, he puts his suits on, his tie, and his proper shoes, and he comes home, he takes all off and bare feet again. But he was adopted by his auntie because his mother died at his birth, and he was adopted by his auntie, who is mom's sister, who was married to a man who was also adopted child. So anyway, this man was born from this family, which in those days, if a girl would get pregnant as a single mother, they would be real rejected, and the whole name of the family would be. So she hid the pregnancy all throughout in auntie's house, here and there. And then when she had the baby, I don't know how they did, but the midwife or whoever was arranged to do that just took the child in some cloth and put it in a rail, the train rail, so that because the train would come in those days it was just once a day. In the very early morning, the train would around maybe 2-3 o'clock in the morning when the train would pass that region. So the middle of the night, this person goes put the baby there. And it's fascinating, this. You can believe or not. It's here in the book. We have all the facts. I'm not making up story here. The guy who was conducting the train, suddenly he started to feel the train it's with a problem. Everybody's sleeping. So he tries to manage to sort it out without needing to stop. Those days, there is a whole process to slow down a train, to stop it. But came to a point that the train itself stopped. So once it stopped, he announced to all the people that were being conducted by him, said, listen, there is a problem here. I don't know what it is. I need to get out. Whoever wants to carry on sleep, stay there. Otherwise, you can get out and stretch your legs. So that's what he did. So some people came to help him to resolve. So as soon as they get out in the dark, deep dark of a kind of forest, because there was nothing built there, people will stretch their legs, and then suddenly they start to hear this noise of a baby crying. At first, they said they thought it was like an animal, a cat or something, and then they start to hear everybody just goes in silence. It's wait, and then they fear it's a baby crying. They were scared. Some people thought it was a ghost. Some people were this story that you just believe because it's your family. So then they start to walk towards some people took a lantern and started to walk towards the crying, and not many meters away was this baby just thrown there in the middle of the rail, wrapped up in cloths. Oh, I feel this, And then when people saw that, and saw the baby there crying, it was just like this mix of talking, everybody, I can't believe that, and people swearing at whoever did that, and then other people crying for the baby, all the women's maternal love is starting to get the baby and trying to sort it out. There was ants in the baby because he had just been born and thrown there without being washed, so the ants was already getting on the baby, and everybody started to take care, and it was like this big, massive movement. And everybody's said, this is God that protects. Everybody starts to see in different ways. And then everybody wants the baby. And they start to fight over the baby. So then one person that said, listen, we will need just to put our names, whoever names comes on picked up, and then we'll have the baby because everybody wants to have the baby. So this person picked the baby, and he brings my grandfather, my great grandfather up, and then later on he marries my auntie, my great auntie, and then adopts my grandfather, which is still alive. That's where I come back. So that's the background, and that's then my grandfather comes with them to Goiás, and now out of this man that was found there on the rails, we were counting, I think when there was a celebration, I'm not very good in numbers exact, but I know was like nearly around 400 relatives that came out for him, that either missionaries or pastors. He himself later in his life gave his life to Jesus, and then my grandfather met Jesus when he was 17, and was a radical salvation. Through him, all the relatives as well start to come, and my grandmother as well. He meets my grandmother. My grandmother was quite young at the time. They need to wait 1 year because she was only 13. And here in Brazil in those days, there was not much of the legal law about getting married young, because there was no registered wedding here, so registered birth certificate. So people would have their children, and once a year when a registered officer would come near the region, the parents would go there and register all their children, and they hadn't written it down. So they would try to remember this one, there are 11 children, 12 children, so this one, they would mix up the names, they would mix up the dates, so many children would have the same age, or some of them, and all the dads and parents would already put their daughters 2-3 years older on the register so they could legally be married when they were ready. Because here in Brazil it's like, if the girl would know how to cook, how to look after the house, how to take care of things, she was ready to get married. That was the rule. So my grandmother got married quite young, at the age of 14, but then that was normal at the time, and she was such a responsible girl. They were all descendants of Italians, and there is a little bit of Jewish blood there as well, but we don't know, we are tracking down now that side, but the Italian ones, our great-great-grandparents are all Italians who came to Brazil. So they have lots of European styles of manners and things, which I really appreciate, because when I think of my grandmother, she was a darling. She was the most hygienic and caring, and good. She cooked so beautiful, and she had this capacity to do so many things during the day, so many responsibilities, and she was so intelligent. She loved reading. She learned to read. Her father actually was to read the Gospel of John to them, to the 11 children. Every night they would sit on a stool around the table, and he would read the Gospel of John to them. Her father, which is my great grandfather, was a very loving man. He died only at the age of 50, but he left so many legacies of his love and the way he was. He was a calligrapher, and he was the only one who, the whole region would come for him to sign things. So I have great respect for all of that. And then my grandmother, beyond listening to the Gospel of John, I remember living with my grandmother. Many of my years I lived with her in her house, and I remember that she knew the Gospel of John by heart, and I would say like, Granny, what is written in John chapter 7, blah, 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 and then she would say, oh, that's the passage of this and this, and then she started to recite it to you. It was like, whoa, she's amazing. And she loved studying. With all the duties she had on a farm. She would plant cafe, she would plant all sorts of vegetables. She had the chickens that she would have the collect the eggs. She produced cheese, she produced all sorts of cakes and things. So she was a multitask lady, but still she would have time to read, to study, and she taught herself to read through the Bible, which is an amazing thing. And I remember living with her as a very young girl. She had this sofa in her house. She was very innovative. anyway, I don't know the word I want to use here, but she and my grandfather was to go to these kind of conferences in different places that they could go, and they would buy lots of books, lots of recordings, this big vinyl kind of sort of thing, and they had one there. So I loved my childhood in their house, because it was indeed a place where I was hidden and I was loved, I was cared for, and I learned so much. So I would go to this sofa and open it, like a sofa bed actually, and open it, and inside there was like a bookshelf and full of all sorts of books, and I would choose the ones that had picture, and I would be looking at the pictures, and there was one on the life of Jesus, and I started to get in love with Jesus at a very young age, because I was to look at the picture. That's the only thing I could read, and she would read it to me. So after a certain time, I would know the book by heart too. When people would come, I would offer to read the book to them and pretend that I knew how to read. So then I said, listen, I want to read to you. So people would come, important people, because my grandfather used to be a businessman, like as a kind of, with other farmers. And all these other farmers comes, and I would entertain them by reading. And they said, but she learned to read quite young, but they didn't know. I just knew it by heart. So, and I promised myself that when I would learn properly, go to school and learn how to read, the first book I want to read would be the Holy Bible. I made my promise. And I remember going to school, and I had already asked, I want my own Holy Bible, and I want to read, and I want to get to know the truth. I want to know the scripture, and I want to know more about Jesus, because he's fascinating. And because from a very young age, I started to realize that Jesus was not a religion for me. I never saw him as a religion. I used to go to church with my parents, with my grandparents, and I loved the privilege that I had to go to church and learn many good things. But as a very young girl, I knew how to discern what was Jesus, what was God, and what was religion. Why do I say that? Because there is a big, huge difference between it. Because a relationship with God and religion is kind of, religions try to show you God. Religions try, but if you let men to rule the religion and establish the rules, and then you end up kind of trapped in the religion. And many people are in the religion, but they never read the Bible. They are years and years, and they defend the religion, they defend their faith in the religion, in their traditions, but they don't know the scriptures. They don't know the personal relationship with the Father, where is a completely different thing. It's so freeing. It's so wonderful when you are able just to know that your Father, you have a Heavenly Father, you can go straight to him in your heart, in your thoughts, because of Jesus. Jesus said, listen, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one can go through the Father besides me. It's quite a radical saying, but I cannot deny it. Because if you believe in it and you come to the Father, if you come to the Holy Father, to the God, and say, Father, through your Son, Jesus Christ, I come to you, and you open your heart to him, I guarantee you, he hears prayers. He hears prayers. He hears your heart. You may say, I don't know how to pray. I don't know how to do this. Silvie, please don't start preaching at me. I'm so enjoying listening to your story. Don't start preaching at me. I'm not here to preach at you. I guarantee that. But I'm just saying that through this experience that I start to have, to difference one thing to the other, I start to have my own talking with Jesus, with Father. And that's why in the beginning of this program I said, God is faithful. Because then I start, as soon as I managed to read, I started to read the scripture, and I decided to read the New Testament first. So I'm reading Matthew, the Gospel of Matthew, and I come to chapter 9, and towards the end of the chapter, and then it's written there, the harvest is big, the harvest is large, and the workers are filled. And then Jesus said, pray to the Father of the harvest that He can send workers to the harvest. And that moment I stopped. And I said, is it you, Jesus, asking us to pray to the Father, asking to have more workers in your kingdom, in your work, to help people? That's all I want to do, to help people. Count on me. I don't only want to pray for others to come to help. I want to be one. Please count on me. I was 80 years old when I did that prayer. And I promise you, He heard it, because He lined up all my life to make one day just me to live a life where I would indeed know that He heard that prayer. He had given me many opportunities to do something for Him, through helping people, through music, through mission works, and work with children, and miracles as well. So for now, I'm going to put a pause on this program, because we will need part 2, because I have so much to share with you of my story that I only started, I'm still on my childhood, and I want to give you a little bit more of how things happened, that one day I go to England, how things happened that I have now a British husband and 4 children, so many miracles between where I am stopping and where I am now, right now, today. So stay with me and wait for our next program. Every week we are coming up with a new episode, and if you want to register yourself or subscribe, whatever you call there on that, you are very welcome to do that on Silvie TV channel on YouTube, and then obviously we will let you know when the next one is coming up.